Hey, running friends. Welcome to the Wrinkled Runner podcast. I'm Sherry, the Wrinkled Runner. I'm over 50 and I love to run wherever I go, but Buffalo, New York is my home. If you are looking to start to run or you're an older runner, this podcast is especially for you, so subscribe now. I love to help people get running and keep running. You may have heard of heart rate training as it relates to running. There are a lot of runners that swear by it and train either all the time or for an extended period of time using their heart rate as their guide. You may also have heard of something called the Maffetone method. This is a way of training by heart rate, but this is to keep you at an aerobic level at all times. So even though it relies on heart rate, it is very specific in its scope. What I am getting into today is how I use heart rate in running and how you can too, even if you don't normally pay much attention to it. The heart rate zones correspond to different types of running. For example, a tempo run would be run in zone 4 using the 5-zone model, which is 90 to 100% of your max heart rate. Different coaches, online running resources, etc. use a 4 or 5-zone model when talking about training. Since I use a Garmin as my data source and they use the 5-zone model, that is what I am talking about here. So zone 1 is 60 to 70% of max heart rate. Zone 2 is 70 to 80. Zone 3 is 80 to 90. Zone 4 is 90 to 100. And zone 5 is an all-out sprinting at 100 to 110 of max. So obviously you're not going to be in zone 5 for very long. Keep in mind as well, there may be a slight variance in the percentages. So some sources will have, say, 91% to 100 is zone 4 or what have you, but I'm just keeping it simple here. Even though my workouts for myself and my athletes are usually set up with paces, there are ways that I also incorporate zones and heart rate. My husband needs a really good warm-up and a really, really good cool down, especially in the summer. So I use zone 2 for his warm-up based on his heart rate for anywhere between a half mile to 2 miles, depending on the length of the run. And I set his intensity goal by heart rate, not pace. I want him to truly warm up and not push before he gets into his real work. Zone 2 can also be used as a cool down, but for Dave, I actually set him at zone 1. He is a serious sweater, and after a really hard workout, he needs that cool down. It is very important for him. So setting him at zone 1 means he may have to walk his whole cool down, which I am okay with. In the heat, our heart rates are driven higher as our core temperature gets warmer, so his heart can be pretty high even at a so-called easy pace. The other day, I gave him a 4-mile pace test where I had him run a mile warm-up and then 4 miles at the top of zone 3 and a few beats into zone 4. He didn't look at his paces and was surprised at how fast he was able to run each mile at the end. I was surprised as well, and I was sure when I looked at his heart rate data, it would show that he was at the upper end of zone 4, but he wasn't. His fitness is definitely improving, and he's running faster paces in zone 3, so that is really good to see. He was on a business trip in California when he did this, and since we live in New York, he had some phone calls at 8 a.m. our time, which is 5 a.m. where he was, so he had to get his runs in at 4 a.m. It was a cooler week there, and he thrives in the cooler weather. Plus, the darkness made it even more comfortable. So fast forward to Saturday when we had a 9-miler, and I had him warm up using heart rate, and then we were switching to what should have been a long run pace, which is very easy. Because it was almost 80 degrees and we were running in the sun, and he didn't fuel well that morning, nor did he hydrate correctly, this run was by no means easy. By mile 5, he felt like he was going to be sick. And at mile 6, I told him to tell me his heart rate, and it was almost at 100%. So that was tempo territory, not easy long run. So we stopped, threw the rest of the workout out the window, and I had him switch to his aerobic heart rate zone for the rest of the run. This was a lot slower than what I know his easy pace should be, but too many other things were going on and preventing him from hitting that pace in a safe space for his heart. Had I tried to force him to get up to easy speed, this could have been a very dangerous run for a dehydrated 56-year-old. So knowing your heart rate zones can be helpful when adjusting a run that just doesn't feel like it should. My recommendation is to use a fitness watch or a chest strap that can give you the information you need and you can see it on the run. Since we use Garmin, I can input workouts that track and notify you if you are in range for pace, heart rate, or cadence, depending on what I use as the intensity indicator. I do the calculations for each client based on their max heart rate using the data from watches and, if need be, a field test. There are several ways to find your max, and I'll link you to good explanations of them in the show notes. Now, I don't like to rely just on the formula of 220 minus age, especially because for me, that is actually way off to what my max heart rate is. Once you know your zones, you can use these out on a run. If you have a long run that is supposed to be an easy one and you feel like crap, check your heart rate. Are you really running easy? Are you in zone 3? If you're not, that run is not fulfilling its purpose. If you're supposed to run a 20-minute tempo, you can check your heart rate, even if you're running by pace, to see if you're really running a tempo. Knowing the zones and where you should fall can help guide you on individual runs and help you make decisions on the road or the treadmill. Learn your heart rate zones and also learn what different workouts are supposed to be as far as in which zone. So like tempos, like I'm talking about, are the faster runs, your heart rate is higher, you're in zone 4. Easy runs should be more in zone 3. Warm-ups and cool-downs should be more in zone 2. This week's running resource is at polar.com, and there are instructions on how to do a field test to find max heart rate. Scroll to the bottom of the page to see that, because at the top there you talk about the 220 minus your age, that formula for finding it. So I like people to find their real heart rate. And you can also go back in the data. That's pretty much how I found mine, is I can go back in my fitness watch data and find, where my max heart rate is, workouts that have gotten me to a maximum heart rate. And that's what I use. Now, the post cautions you, and I caution you, do this with a friend or a running partner present. I never allow a client to do a field test for max heart rate on their own. And you need to have been running for a solid period of time. This isn't something you just go out and do if you haven't been running, or if you're, you just finished your couch to 5K. I do not want you to run a field test for heart rate unless you have a coach and that coach recommends it. That coach is there with you. Driving your heart rate up is not a smart or safe thing to do if you're on your own. Make sure your doctor knows that you are running, and that you started a exercise program, and that they are okay with your level of exercise, and that they also are okay with you running a kind of field test to find out what your max heart rate is. Next week, I'll be talking about deciding not to do a race. Now, this past winter, I started training for my deferred for 2 years because of COVID, Flying Pig Marathon. And I decided about 6 weeks out that I wasn't going to run it. So listen in as I discuss my decision and maybe get some takeaways if that decision ever comes knocking at your door. I hope you enjoyed today's episode. If you know another runner who could benefit from today's topic, go ahead and share it. Do you have any running questions? You can ask me. Email me at sherry@wrinkledrunner.com, and if I can't answer your question, I will do the research to find the answer and share it with you. The questions I get from listeners like you help me develop episodes, so please don't be shy. You can sign up for my once-a-month newsletter using the link provided so that you can have all the Wrinkled Runner resources from the past month all in one place. I also have opened up my virtual coaching in addition to coaching one-on-one with those in the Buffalo, New York area. So head to my coaching page on the Wrinkled Runner website, which I will, of course, link to, and check out how we may be able to work together. Until next Monday, thanks for listening, and I'll see you on the run.